The wind dragged itself across the desert in long, wavering breaths, carrying the dusty scent of sagebrush and the brittle promise of another dry season. Ethan Calder stood with one boot propped on the bottom fence rail, the leather cracked from years of sun. The morning light spilled thinly over his ranch, washing the fields in a pale gold that made everything look more alive than it truly was. In truth, the land had been fading for years. The cattle were fewer now, the riverbed ran shallow, and loneliness crept over the place like creeping sand swallowing a homestead plank by plank. Ethan had grown used to the quiet, but sometimes, in the stillness before dawn when even the birds kept silent, he wondered if the world was trying to remind him that a man could disappear long before his body ever did. He squinted toward the wash that cut across the north side of his property, expecting to see nothing more than wind-carved shadows. Instead, he saw movement, a small group approaching with slow, deliberate steps. 3 shapes emerged more clearly as they drew nearer, a man, a woman, and a young boy no older than 7. Their clothes were dusty but well kept, their posture proud despite the weight of travel. Apache, Ethan realized immediately, though such encounters had grown rare in this part of Arizona. The man walked slightly ahead, his shoulders set, his eyes scanning the land with the alertness of someone who had learned not to trust open ground. Ethan lifted a hand in greeting. The man returned the gesture with a short nod, cautious but respectful, while the woman kept her gaze low, her hand resting lightly on her son's back as if memorizing the shape of him in case danger threatened. They stopped a few yards from the fence. Ethan stepped forward slowly, not wanting to startle them. "Morning," he said. "Water pumps just over there if you need it." The man hesitated before speaking, his voice rough but steady. "We seek water, nothing more." "That's all right," Ethan replied. "Help yourselves." The man glanced at his wife, then at the boy, and finally nodded. They walked toward the windmill pump, and Ethan watched as the family drank deeply from the clear stream that gushed from the spout. The boy cupped his small hands awkwardly, spilling half the water before managing to get a few good mouthfuls. Ethan found himself chuckling softly despite the silence around him. He walked over and showed the boy how to form his palms into a tight bowl. The child mimicked the gesture, eyes wide with shy focus, and this time managed to drink without losing a drop. The mother watched Ethan with a measured look, still wary, yet touched by a flicker of something that might become trust if handled with care. As the sun dipped lower toward the horizon, painting everything in warm copper, Ethan realized the family was exhausted. The man's shoulders sagged in a way that had nothing to do with physical burden, and the woman's face held the subtle slump of someone who had carried her fear for far too long. "You're free to stay by the barn tonight," Ethan offered. "The old wagon there will block the wind. Nights get cold out here." He fully expected the man to decline. Pride and caution both ran deep, especially between their peoples. But after a long moment, the man said quietly, "We will stay. Only until morning." "That's enough," Ethan replied. They made camp beside the barn, building a small fire from scraps of mesquite. Ethan stayed near his porch, watching the flames flicker against the settling night. He hadn't had anyone on his land in months. The presence of another human voice even murmured. Even cautious made something in him loosen, a knot he hadn't known he'd been tightening for years. He tried to busy himself, checking the latch on the chicken coop and brushing down his horse, but his attention kept drifting toward the family. When their fire began to dim, Ethan walked over with a split log in his arms, placing it beside the flames. The father looked up sharply, knife in hand, but relaxed when he recognized Ethan's silhouette. "You do not owe us this," he said. Ethan shrugged, hands open. "Nobody owes anything. Folks just help where they can." The man studied him in the firelight. His eyes were dark, reflecting both wariness and a depth of grief Ethan could almost feel himself. After a while he said, "My name is Taza. This is Isi, my wife, and our son Nanton." Ethan nodded politely and sat on an overturned bucket a few feet from their fire. "Ethan Calder. This ranch belonged to my father before me." Taza's gaze drifted over the land, sweeping across the fields that had grown too dry and fences too old. Your land is wide, he said. Wider than I can manage anymore, Ethan admitted. Lost most of my hands last winter when the drought hit harder. A solemn silence settled between them, thick with unspoken memories. At length Taza exhaled heavily. Our village was burned, he said, each word shaped with reluctant honesty. Soldiers came, said we had no right to stay. Those who survived fled into the mountains. We have wandered since. We seek a place to breathe. Only breathe, nothing more. Ethan felt the weight of the confession like a stone dropped into his chest. He'd heard stories like this, always spoken quietly, always ending the same way, with loss. He stared out into the dark where his land stretched endlessly, empty and unbruised by anything except time. Something in him stirred, an instinct older than fear, older than boundaries. There's land behind that ridge, he said, pointing toward the shadowed curve near the horizon. Good soil. Better than what's up here. If you want it, it's yours. Taza's head lifted sharply. Easy's breath caught, eyes widening. Even the boy stilled. Ethan kept his voice calm. Not charity. Just land needing people. And people needing land. Taza searched Ethan's face as if trying to see whether the offer hid some trick or hidden price. When he found none, his expression shifted, not softened, but deepened. Why would you give this to us? He asked quietly. Ethan thought for a long moment. Because no one should wander without a place to come home to, he said simply. And because this land deserves hands that know how to treat it right. Taza placed a hand over his chest, a gesture Ethan didn't understand but felt the sincerity of. We accept, he said. Ethan nodded. The night fell into peaceful silence, broken only by the soft crackle of fire and the distant howl of a lone coyote. Something had changed on his ranch that night, something bigger than a simple agreement. The air felt different, charged with the beginning of something Ethan couldn't yet name. And as he returned to his porch, he had no idea that by dawn, the land he'd offered would bring far more than one family. It would bring an entire tribe. The first hint of dawn had barely begun to smear the sky with pale gray when Ethan woke to an odd, tremoring pulse in the earth beneath his floorboards. At first he thought it was the old ranch house settling, the way it sometimes groaned when the temperature shifted. But the vibration didn't fade. It came again, then again steady, rhythmic, as if someone far off was beating the ground with deliberate intent. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, pulled on his boots, and stepped outside just as the horizon began to glow with the earliest light. The morning air was cold, sharp enough to sting his nostrils, but the strange tremor warmed the air with tension. He stood on the porch, eyes narrowing at the eastern ridge. For a long moment he saw nothing but the familiar jagged silhouette of the land. Then small, dark shapes began to move over it, quiet at first, like drifting smoke. As the light grew, the shapes multiplied, stretching out into a long line that descended the slope with slow, controlled purpose. Ethan felt his pulse stumble. These were no travelers. This was a gathering. Figures emerged more clearly as the sun rose behind them, turning them into silhouettes rimmed with gold. Men on foot walked in disciplined rows. Women carried bundles wrapped in colorful cloth. Elders leaned on carved walking sticks. Children clung to their mothers' skirts. Horses trotted alongside them, their hooves muffled by the sand, but still adding to the thundering cadence that rolled toward the ranch, like a heartbeat made of earth and muscle. Ethan counted dozens at first, then more, until he realized the line stretched farther than he could see. They came with the calm force of a river meeting land after a long drought. He took a slow, unsteady breath. Taza's family had accepted the land the night before, but nothing had prepared Ethan for this. He wondered if he had overstepped, if offering that land had been a trigger for something larger than he had meant to awaken. A tribe arriving in such numbers wasn't a casual visit. This was intentional. This was ceremonial. This was history moving on its own legs. As the first group drew close enough for faces to be seen, Ethan spotted Taza at the front wearing a different expression than the night before. Not weary, not cautious, something stronger. Something rooted in the kind of belonging only a people bound by blood and memory could carry. His wife, Isi, walked beside him, her eyes steady, her son gripping her hand but smiling in a way Ethan hadn't seen him smile the night before. Behind them, a drum in the hands of an elder woman thumped with slow, steady beats that vibrated through Ethan's ribs. Calling the morning awake. The TA raised a hand to signal the tribe to slow as he approached the porch. Ethan stepped down, boots crunching the frosted sand. He wasn't afraid, but he felt the weight of the moment pressing on him like the rising sun. When he reached Taza, they faced each other in silence for a breath before Taza spoke. Ethan called her. He said, voice clear in the cold air. Last night you gave my family a gift. When I told my people, they chose to come. I didn't expect this many, Ethan admitted, his voice uncertain. I didn't expect anyone but you. Taza nodded. A single family cannot claim land. A tribe can. You gave enough earth for roots? They have arrived to plant them. Ethan swallowed hard. I didn't mean to start something dangerous. Taza's expression softened, just slightly. You started something sacred? Without another word, Taza turned to the tribe and raised his arm. The drum stopped. Silence swept the plain like a slow-moving tide. One by one, they arranged themselves into a great circle around Ethan's front yard, the formation precise but organic, as if every member instinctively understood their place in it. Ethan had never witnessed anything like it. It felt like watching a sunrise take human shape. An elder stepped forward, a woman with long silver hair, braided with strips of red cloth. Her eyes were sharp, ancient, assessing Ethan as though measuring the truth of his soul. She held a small woven pouch in her hands. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but the silence carried it as if it were wind. You gave our children a place where no flames chase them, she said. So you will stand in our circle. Ethan hesitated. I'm not sure I belong in something I don't understand. Taza came to his side. Understanding comes later. First comes standing. Ethan exhaled shakily. Then stepped into the circle beside Taza. Immediately a warmth spread through the gathering, not from the sun, but from the collective breath of many people welcoming the dawn as one. The elder lifted her hands, and a low chant began to rise from the circle. It started with the women's soft, steady humming and then deepened as the men joined, layering their voices until the air seemed to vibrate with something ancient and vast. Ethan felt the sound in his bones more than in his ears. It was not a song in the way he understood songs. It was a remembering of earth, of loss, of endurance. It was the sound of a people refusing to disappear. The dance began slowly, feet brushing the dust in circular steps that stirred small clouds glowing in the golden light. The sun crested the horizon fully now, drenching the gathering in brilliant amber. Ethan stood still, unsure whether to bow his head or raise it. Then he felt a tug at his hand. Nanta, the small boy, had slipped into the circle and taken his fingers with shy certainty. Ethan looked down at him, startled. The boy smiled. The chant deepened, flowing into a second rhythm, then a third. Ethan felt as though the land beneath them had woken fully after decades of silence, after being trampled and fought over and taken without care. Now it breathed again with life and memory. He wasn't sure if he belonged here, but no one pushed him out of the circle. Taza's presence beside him was steady, grounding, as if saying without words, you did this and you are part of it now. When the ceremony ended, the tribe began to disperse toward the land Ethan had offered. They moved with purpose, marking out where homes would rise, where crops would grow, where children would play, where elders would rest. The valley that had once been empty now pulsed with new beginnings. Ethan watched them, strangely humbled. Taza turned back, walking to Ethan with sand, whispering beneath his steps. This land remembers kindness, he said quietly. And so will our children. Asterisk Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Emotion tightened his throat unexpectedly. In the distance, he saw one of the elders kneeling, scooping a handful of soil and letting it fall through her fingers like gold. Children ran near the creek bed, already claiming it with laughter. Women unfurled blankets that fluttered in the breeze like flags of arrival, asterisk, and for the first time in a very long while, Ethan felt something stir in his chest that he hadn't felt since before his father died and the ranch grew so quiet. Asterisk, he felt alive. Asterisk, the tribe had come at dawn and with them. They had brought the sunrise.